Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, Crossing New Frontiers to Conquer Today's Challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be here on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
Thank you very much. I'm Philip Emeagwali. Parallel supercomputing is the most important invention in the history of the computer. The experimental invention of the massively parallel supercomputer that solves many problems at once instead of solving only one problem at a time is one of the computing industry's most hopeful narrative. Parallel supercomputing is an entirely new approach to modern computer science. Without parallel supercomputing, we will only know what might happen. With parallel supercomputing, we know what will happen. For 200 millennia, we strove to make our world a more knowledgeable place. We discovered new fields of study. The field of study that I discovered in the 1970s and 80s is called massively parallel supercomputing. I discovered the supercomputer hopefuls' most well-guarded secret, namely practical parallel processing across a new internet. But the heart of supercomputing isn't the fastest calculations. The heart of supercomputing is solving the grand challenge problems of computer science. I have three quote-unquote first supercomputers that corresponded to three technologies. The first quote-unquote first supercomputer of 1946 was the first that was programmable. The second quote-unquote first supercomputer of December 1965 was the first supercomputer to be rated at 1 million instructions per second. I began programming that second quote-unquote first supercomputer on June 20, 1974 in Corvallis, Oregon, United States. The third and most important first supercomputer is the precursor to the modern supercomputer of today that can execute large-scale, excruciatingly detailed computational fluid dynamics codes such as climate models and execute them across millions of tightly coupled commodity off-the-shelf processors. Back in the 1980s, parallel processing was controversial and was mocked by the community of 25,000 vector supercomputer scientists. Looking back, that widespread rejection of parallel processing gave its acceptance in 1989 some street cred. If you invent something that everybody accepted, then you've not invented anything new. None of the 25,000 vector supercomputer scientists or their leader Seymour Cray had a deep understanding of practical parallel processing. If they understood how to solve real-world problems as opposed to textbook problems, and if they understood how to parallel process and how to solve grand challenge problems and how to solve them across an actual ensemble of 64 binary thousand processors, then Seymour Cray would not have mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed parallel processing as a huge waste of everybody's time. Seymour Cray is best remembered for his famous quote that ridiculed parallel processing as the technology that will render his supercomputers obsolete. Seymour Cray taunted aspiring parallel supercomputer scientists by asking them, quote, "If you were plowing a field, which would you rather use? 2 strong oxen or 1,024 chickens?" Unquote. This famous quote of Seymour Cray was used to taunt me when I was attempting to solve the toughest problems arising in mathematics and physics and attempting to solve them by parallel processing them across my new internet. That was a new global network of 65,536 processors. Back in 1989, it made the news headlines that an African supercomputer wizard in the United States had figured out that 65,536 chickens that were his metaphors for his as many commodity off-the-shelf processors that were tightly coupled to each other, and figured out that those processors can communicate and compute together and do so as one cohesive whole virtual supercomputer, and do so to become more powerful than one strong ox that was Seymour Cray's metaphor for the vector supercomputer. I'm Philip Emeagwali, and I'm the African supercomputer scientist that was in the news back in 1989. I was in the news because I discovered that practical parallel supercomputing will become the vital technology that underpins every supercomputer. The comparison of my contributions during the 1970s and 80s to the collective contributions of the other 25,000 supercomputer scientists is an act that lacks historical context and perspective, namely my discovery of parallel supercomputing and comparing that single person's contribution to the collective contribution of the 1,000 employees of a supercomputer giant that was paid billions of dollars to deliver supercomputers that embodied my new knowledge of parallel supercomputing. I began programming one of the world's fastest supercomputers back on June 20, 1974 at age 19 in Corvallis, Oregon, United States. What is a supercomputer? The fastest supercomputer occupies the space of a soccer field. The fastest supercomputer costs the budget of any of the 40 poorest nations in the world. The supercomputer is like the lighthouse for science. Supercomputing at the fastest recorded speed is like climbing the Mount Everest of science.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.